Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Be My Guest, episode number 18. Just moving right along. We are coming up on that halfway of the year point. I can't believe we've gotten to this point so far so fast. So, as always, please subscribe to any of the channels you hear me through, whether it be YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Apple, Spotify, all the different podcast channels, whether you take this in video or audio. It's all some great content. So like, subscribe, comment, continue to give me that great feedback. Continue to reach out to me to be my guest because we have so many great people that have reached out, as we've talked about in the past. Today is no exception. We have Mr. David Salcfas on with us. He's choosing to be my guest because he reached out to me through Hospitality Family, and I am so happy he did. David has a lot of years in the hotel industry, and he was actually one of the people that were in a leadership position in a hotel that closed permanently. Unfortunately, people may know out there, especially in a lot of the primary cities, especially in New York City, hotels have closed. And unfortunately, the decision was made for David's hotel to close above him, of course. But he had the unfortunate responsibility to kind of go through those closing procedures. Now, the good news, he did pick up another job shortly after running a prestigious hotel in Manhattan. So we're going to talk to him about the mentality, kind of the mindset going through that whole operation, how he was able to stay positive, because you don't get too many people willing to come on these shows to talk about a situation like that. So I'm very grateful that he is. And we're going to talk about a new endeavor that he's starting that's coming out of COVID. So without further ado, let's bring him on. Mr. David Salcfas, how are you today, my friend?
Great, Dave. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing well. Thanks so much for joining me today. Again, it's really a great honor for me to have someone of your experience and your stature within the industry on our show.
My absolute pleasure. So I look forward to speaking with you and having some good dialogue here.
Appreciate it. So let's just get right into it, David. Tell us about yourself. What's your experience in the industry, and how did you get to where you are today?
Sure. I'll sum it up in a couple of lines because the resume is quite long. 35 years in the hospitality industry, um, 21 positions, 15 hotels across 5 different brands, several restaurants from Florida all the way up to Boston, mainly on the East Coast. Ranged in convention resort network hotels, core hotels, to luxury properties, to where I'm at today in a boutique style hotel. So it's been quite the ride, quite the journey, and I've got a lot of good years left. And the situation might have been pretty adverse that I just went through, as many people have in the industry.
Hmm.
But I think that's what makes the industry as special and as opportunistic as it can possibly be. With one door closes, another one opens, and that's exactly what's happened to me along the way here, past 9 months.
Yeah, I mean, again, we'll talk into the closure of your hotel and how you transferred into the new property and certainly the new adventure that you're starting as well. But with your experience in the industry and being in different major markets, how do you compare what's happening currently to anything you've ever seen in the past?
Well, I mean, what's happened over the past 9 months with COVID-19 is just unprecedented. Um, to have such a dramatic, no warning
Hmm.
stop to the business at hand, which started with mainly food and beverage outlets, where if you had some sort of club lounge or a concierge facility, you have your premium guests in the hotel, and the next thing you know, that's on Wednesday, they got to enjoy it. And then on Thursday morning, there's a sign on the door that says closed, and people didn't see it coming. Whereas, and you never really do, but this was so sudden. And then the communication that was coming across the airwaves, particularly in New York City, I'll speak to because that's where I was, obviously. It was supposed to be a 2-week shutdown,
Yeah.
and we were going to get through it, and we needed people to just kind of, embrace it, which they did. And we were communicating this with our guests, we were communicating this with our employees, and before you know it, here we are at the end of the year, and we're still talking about it, and we're still in those shutdown situations. So it's not a one-time situation where, when 9/11 occurred, obviously it was one of the most dramatic things that I've ever experienced. I watched that from the rooftop in Brooklyn when I saw the first I saw this when I heard about the first tower. I went to the rooftop of the building that I was working in at that time in downtown Brooklyn, and I watched the plane literally hit the second tower. I
Wow.
watched it unfold before my very eyes. It was one of the saddest things I've ever seen. And we pulled together as a community, as a city, and the rest of the world supported us with moral support. But we did it. Whereas things like what just happened with COVID and what happened with the recession in the end of 2008 into 2009, that impacted the whole the United States, but COVID impacted the world.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it unique. It's not just, some cities and some states have had different experiences and different levels of shutdown and restrictions and those sort of things. And it's just, how do you manage it? And you got to find
Yeah.
ways to power through it. And that's what it just makes it unique. And it's so unique to what's ever happened in the past when there's been unfortunate adverse situations. This one, you're kind of making it up as you go, and then you didn't have time. You just were in shutdown mode,
Right.
and then after about the first month, then you start to become a little bit more strategic and proactive with the protocols. And we've come up with protocols that are probably going to be very sustainable and going to be here for a very long time, even after COVID, with the way people check in, with the way they dine, with the way they're, the health and safety protocols. These are things that I think are going to stay with us for a very long time as we move forward.
Yeah, and that's the big question. You bring up, you were in New York City for 9/11 and 2008 and this current event. I was not working for 9/11, but I was in New York City for this event. And I remember, as March was coming through and we're all trying to get a grasp, as you said, it was just like overnight.
Yeah.
Like it was like February 29th where everyone's having a party because the city is doing so well. I'm sure your hotel in February and January were doing amazing. And then March 1st comes, like overnight, everything starts falling apart. And as this becomes more, the same thing, like, okay, well, this will be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we'll get through it, it'll be done. And as this kind of develops and we start to see the NBA get canceled and Major League Baseball get pushed back and hockey gets canceled and all these different things start to get canceled, every other minute I look at my phone, there's a new notification and I start, we're sending, it's like, wow, this is getting worse and worse and worse, faster and faster and faster. And to your point about 9/11, early on in this, people are asking me about what is going on over there, right? What's going on in general. And I'm, what are we looking at? And I'm like, listen, 9/11 was a traumatic event for a lot of people. 9/11, this is not to, what's the word? To, I can't think of the word right now, but this is not to
Minimize it.
There you go. Minimize the impact of the events of 9/11. But in terms of just the impact on the travel industry, right? 9/11 was very localized to the New York City market, the Washington, D.C. market. This is the equivalent of impact on the travel industry of 9/11 across the entire world.
Right. And, so I'll give you an example. So where I was in Brooklyn, we were we're the recipient of much of the business that was impacted from Lower Manhattan. They needed somewhere to go, that needed a facility that had the capacity that we did. So we were able to accommodate not just hotels, but catering facilities and restaurants.
Right.
So we in essence benefited from that. But it also wasn't, something where occupancy dropped and rates were, really went in, in the reverse direction.
Right.
It was a different type of scenario.
Right.
And you were able to, some would have benefited from even in Midtown Manhattan because some of the people that were displaced needed new office spaces. They didn't decide to work from home. We were in a time back then where what we're doing right now with this virtual session.
Yeah.
I don't know that podcasting existed. Maybe it did.
No,
I wasn't aware of it.
It was in its infancy if it was.
I think I was on my second series of BlackBerry when 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
Because email really didn't come into play in a very robust way until we probably got into the early 2000s, 2002, 2003. That's when that started to take off.
Right.
Many hotels were still on manual diaries with how they book business, for catering and that sort of thing. So it's very unique. And then when you talk about the recession, those were situations when you talk about things that are going to be sustainable after it, so during the recession, you had to find ways that you were going to save costs, whether it was labor, whether it was heat, light, and power, whether it was as simple as, how you served your soda on your coffee break.
Right.
We always had the bottled soda and they were expensive. So we ended up going to the smaller cans of soda. I still remember these cans of soda, and people were like, well, that's going to be such a devalue to what we're putting out. But it was a necessary thing.
Right.
Because if you impact that over, the course of 365 days, you saved a ton of money.
Right.
And those were the type of things. And if you did that across your brand and your portfolio of hotels, it was thousands that led to millions. And that's how we were looking at it. We were pinching pennies, but it added up. And pennies equal dollars. And that was the strategy. Where with COVID, this is something where people just are not traveling.
There's no top line at all.
And there's no top line, which has forced hotels to literally close, as you know.
Yeah.
80% of the hotel workers in New York City are unemployed or on layoff or furlough of some way.
Yeah.
And, most people that are working in hotels are on some level of reduced work week, or still on furlough, or working remote and not even going into the property because there's no guests there.
Right.
So it's a very unique time. And then you couple it with some of the other things that have happened in society with, not to get into a political conversation in any way,
right.
But that has impacted it. And it's very unique, even up until up until an hour ago, if you go on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn, or any one of these social media sites, and what they're talking about is, this is wonderful stimulus where there's money that people desperately need, and now they're trying to question, should they or shouldn't they veto the bill?
Right.
So it's really, it just keeps evolving, and it keeps evolving in such a way where, a housekeeper is in need of that, because they're not going to come back to work when you're only running 3% occupancy in a hotel. You have to remember, your typical housekeeper is going to clean about 14 rooms a day on average.
Right.
So for every block of rooms that we just, that simple wedding room block that you take for granted, that's 10 rooms, that keeps one person working.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you want to look at it.
Yeah.
So that block of rooms, you don't even have that because you're not allowed to have a catering function. So there's no block to even put into a hotel that's at a local venue. So nobody's even sharing the wealth at this point. And it's become, it's heated up. And I think it's at a point now where, there's no longer, a decision has to be reached because people are hurting. And that's for sure. I mean, I've had to lay off hundreds.
Well, let's talk about that. And again, for context, for people that are listening to this, because this is going to come out weeks and weeks and weeks after we record this, because I just have so many great episodes in the log. So right now we're sitting here. It's the end of December. The stimulus bill was announced, but I don't think it's been signed into law yet. And there's some conversation back and forth right now if there's going to be more money or not. So that's kind of pending. And that's what David's referring to. By the time this airs, I'm assuming that will be figured out. And there may even be another stimulus by then. Who knows? But
yeah, I'm not going to give a prediction because
yeah, they're going to come back and say, David, you said this.
Mm-mm.
But we're talking again about all these catastrophic events, both just in life, like 9/11 and the recession, but also towards the tourism and the travel industry. The thing that really changed about this for me is when this all started to take place again back in March, it was not like it was like, okay, we're going to figure things out. A lot of companies in March itself started laying people off, furloughs. I mean, heavy action was taken because, as you said, we just said, all of the top line was gone. So you could save pennies all you want. You're still not going to flow properly because you have no top line revenue. Your hotels, unfortunately, were one of the hotels that did not make it through this. And I'm not sure what they're going to be doing with your property after this, if it's going to be repurposed or what the deal is. You may actually have a better idea than I am, but that's neither here nor there. Point being is, as you're going through this, that message comes down from corporate level that you're not going to make it through. And actually, I'm sure that's probably come from ownership. What is your first reaction going through your head when you hear that news?
Well, a lot of these situations just don't happen, the way we close the doors because a decision was made by the city that you had to be closed. So, it becomes a collaborative decision amongst all channels. So, depending on your ownership dynamic is, whoever your brand, your operator is, and there could be a lender in there too, because you got to remember you have owners, operators, and lenders. So everybody has a stake in the game with all these stakeholders, and it has to be a collaborative decision. So, as an operator, you're always going to look to see, can I save enough cost to not put us in that situation to close the facility? And you assess it, you analyze it, you do all the math, and when it comes right down to it, you have to look at it also from a health and safety perspective, because you don't want to put any of your staff or your guests in jeopardy. And as this thing started to spread, and I still remember, it was one person in Westchester County, as I think where we heard about it first, and then the next thing you know, it was cascading into Manhattan, and it just spread like wildfire. And at that point, around the same time, all of the first responders were being called, pretty quickly in April. So you were looking at that to say, could that get me through this? But it was such a rated piece of business that you have to make a business decision too.
And just for anybody out there who's maybe newer in the industry, when Davis is rated, that means the rate of the actual rooms, and those rooms were coming in very low rated. So, at some scenarios in some hotels, the rate doesn't necessarily justify the block.
Right. So, just to put it in perspective, real dollars, an average rate in a typical Manhattan hotel is probably, $299 to $350. Let's just say as the rate, and the rate for this, which is the right thing to do, and that's why many hotels did it. It wasn't about making money; it was about taking care of the first responders.
Correct.
And then also giving, some level of cash flow that could come into the building, even if it was, at $119. It was pretty low, and that was the right thing to do. And one of the hotels that I was at, we did it, and that was I was proud of that. But in terms of, when the decision is reached, once you align with all the appropriate people, a decision has to be made ultimately by your ownership group, because they're the ones paying the bill. Just like you pay your mortgage, ultimately you make that decision of how you're going to, spend your money, which we've all had to adjust for one reason or another. And it's all about how you communicate it. And transparency was the key for me. I made sure that I was transparent with my management team. I was transparent with my employees. I was transparent with our guests. And empathy is the next word, is that things you didn't know the level then that we know now of how long it was going to be.
Right.
But I can tell you with all sincerity and how I handled the situation, I handled it that we would close, and I never promised anything because I didn't know.
Right.
And that's where I'm talking about the communication of being transparent and empathetic. And I have to tell you, the people that every single person that I spoke to, whether you were any one of those parties, was absolutely a professional. They understood, they embraced it, and nobody took a negative stance on it. Everybody said, how do I make this? How do I support you? And those were the type of conversations that I was having with people, and it was wonderful. And we got through it. Where the hotel will end up, I'm not sure. I'm no longer there. It's in the hands of someone else now.
Right.
But
I mean, that's awesome. That's awesome to hear that the people that were working for you and working with you were And that's a story that I think we've seen across the industry, not with everybody, but a lot of people have understood that there's nobody's fault, right? This isn't David's
Right.
decision. This isn't the ownership's decision. I mean, it's their decision, obviously, but it's really nobody's fault when it comes down to it because there's nothing you can do. I mean, everybody understands that when, again, talking about personal finances, if you stop taking in money, then you can't spend money, right?
Yeah, I remember, from an emotional standpoint, and it was really about emotion. And as the general manager and the leader of the hotel, the way, or any situation, whether it's COVID or just dealing with an upset guest, you have to maintain your emotional composure. And I still remember when I was communicating the shutdown that we will be closing and we will, no longer be open. What we did is I had a housekeeper who had worked in the hotel for, oh my God, 40 plus years. She was a wonderful, wonderful lady, and she would take care of the exec offices, and I would have a conversation with her every morning. It was an absolute pleasure. And I wasn't a real plant guy, but she put a plant in my office, and she took care of it. And she said, David, you got to have green, you got to have nature in your, and and this is, she's religious, and this is how she connected.
Mhm.
So I said, absolutely, and we kept it there. So I still remember that I pulled all the employees into the lobby, and we put the plant in a vase on a table in the middle of the lobby. Now the lobby is going to be dark, for the next several weeks. We didn't know how
Right.
long, or months for that matter. And we said, we're going to leave the plant here. We're going to water it. We're going to nurture it, and we turned on a very dim light next to it so it had light. And we said, we'll replant this plant in a bigger place when we reopen.
Wow.
So from what I understand, the plant is still in the lobby. Obviously this is, one of those emotional touch points, and there's many stories like that.
Yeah.
When I was doing it, I broke down, I cried. And I still remember my tenured um, bellman coming up to me and giving me a hug. And he's like, David, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. We know it's not
Powerful.
you. And it touched my heart. And those are the type of things, that very night, we also did the Heart of Hope in the hotel, and we broadcast it like many hotels did.
Yeah.
And I don't think you see too many of those pictures now, maybe a few. But people tried to do those symbolic things because these hotels are living, breathing places. Just because it's 100 rooms or, you know, 2,000 rooms,
Yeah.
the people in the hotel are the people, and that's what makes it special. And you cannot take that for granted. And as a general manager, in whether it's New York City, Detroit, San Diego, Dallas, doesn't matter where you're at, you the heart of the operation, the soul of the hotel is your people.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very powerful series of stories. And I think it just goes into show how, your style of leadership and how much you really care about your people. But let's for a second put them on the side because you're also a person yourself. You're also an employee yourself. You're someone who has a career, a very long and successful career at that.
Right.
What's going through your head personally as you understand that your current position is coming up? I know you have another role now within the same company in a different property. Did you already have that set prior to the closure, or was that something that was given, that you got after it was closed and you had like a kind of a break?
No, it all happened simultaneously. And when we closed the hotel for COVID, the decision was made that there was another. I was fortunate. I was that another hotel general manager position became vacant, and because both hotels were potentially in a closed state, I was able to take on a dual role.
Okay,
And then when my other hotel closed completely, then I just stayed there, on a permanent basis where I'm
got
at
it,
today.
got it.
Um, but if what was going through my head was, 55 years old, I've got 4 kids, 2 in college, one right behind him that's going to go to college next year.
Mm,
I'm like, how do I pay for
right. Yeah.
this? You
Absolutely.
know, as besides being, a leader of, anywhere from, 100 to 250 employees, I'm also a devoted husband and father that is committed that I've got to provide for my family.
Yeah.
And I said, how am I going to do this? And, um, you know, the company stood by me. I stood by the company. And, I adjusted some things that I have in my own life because there was some adjustments that I had to make as well. And I'm here. I'm still standing, and I'm resilient. And like I said in the beginning, I got a lot of life still to live, and that's where we ended up. But you know, the whole goal is that I could also try to mentor some of the younger managers, because I remember one manager saying to me, "My career is over," and I said, "No, your career's not over. You're we're going to find something for you, and whatever that is, I don't know that yet, but we're going to stay in contact. And here's my cell number. Let's stay in contact. Let's get your resume ready. Let's get it out there to various people." And I was able to help people pivot, and that was the key. And that was the key word that came next was, how do you pivot into something else and
Right.
make yourself marketable? And really, I tell you, the people that I learned from that the most were my kids.
Mm,
So I have three sons and a daughter. My daughter's the 17-year-old in high school, and I've got an older son. He's 23, just graduated college um, in January of 2020. So he was working full time as a personal trainer. His company severed him, like many of the hotel workers. And he said, then he got a job with somebody doing construction, and he got his degree in health and exercise science. And he came to me and my wife, and he said, "Listen," he says, "I've got this idea and this organization I've looked into. It's called the Medical Sales College, and I'm going to pursue a career in orthopedics and extremity sales. And this is the cost for the tuition." And we're like, well, "What is this?"
yeah.
And he's finishing it in 2 weeks. He signed up. He took out a loan. He pivoted. He adjusted. Um, he was, he's networking, and he's going to be positioned for a pretty good job along the way, selling orthopedics and extremities for whether it's a shoulder or knee, foot.
Right. Right.
And
That's awesome.
so, my kids stayed, on course and resilient. They didn't let COVID say, "I'm not going to find a job." They
Right.
found it. They did something with it. My other son, he was supposed to have an internship with the company that I worked for, and they eliminated the internship
Yeah.
program.
Most.
So,
Yeah.
so there was no program. So he went on LinkedIn and he sourced an internship with a different hotel company in New Hampshire.
Nice.
He did. He went. He did the internship, and now he's on his second internship because he's going to get his degree in finance.
Very
And then,
nice.
and then I have a 19-year-old freshman in college, and he's going to pursuing his degree in business. And he started his own little entrepreneurial business where he started a fitness program, for young kids, and also a moving company with his high school friends.
Very
And
cool.
he formed an LLC. He registered it, and you know they're doing it. I don't know what else to say. And my daughter joined the EMS because she wants to go to school to be a nurse, and she's going to go take her EMT course at the local college in January. So I got four kids that if they can do it, anybody can, and I'm proud of them.
And you should be, and you absolutely should be, and that's an awesome. I love how you're basically said, you're looking up to your kids for that kind of that mindset because they're all young adults and they've taken that step in these hard times and tried to pivot and tried to be an entrepreneurial mindset. And in a second, we're gonna talk about your entrepreneurial adventure that you're starting through these difficult times. And maybe this is kind of a redundant question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. if you're, you spoke about the manager who said his career is over. And I think a lot of people feel that way right now, whether you're someone who's been in the industry for 30 plus years, whether you're someone who's been in the industry for, 8 years like myself, whether you're brand new or anywhere in between that. I think a lot of people can feel like my career is over, and they may not have the support system that, your manager had with you. So if someone's listening to this right now, feeling that way, that their hospitality career is over and that's all they've ever known, it's all they've ever loved, and they're having trouble pivoting, what would you tell that person, regardless of what stage of life they're in?
I would tell them that they've got to really take a good look at themselves and and take a look and be willing to travel, be willing to go anywhere, be willing to adjust, be willing to go to whatever area of the country that will keep them employed, because it's a moment in time. When I talk about, 21 positions, at 15 different properties, I was fortunate to kind of stay on the East Coast. But the truth of the matter is, if I would have broadened my reach and I would have potentially gone wherever that I potentially, where the opportunity would have presented itself, whether it's in a big major city, and I would have did that sooner, I
Mhm.
feel like I could be a little bit further along in my own career. So I don't think that this will hurt them. I think that they need to be flexible. They need to pivot. They need to find a way to make that work. And if they don't have a mentor, they need to get one, and they need to get one right away.
How can you get one?
Go on LinkedIn.
But how do you?
Maybe
So how would you?
if
Obviously,
someone,
you're someone who's pretty open to working with people. So if I'm someone who doesn't have a mentor, someone I can't look up to just yet, how can I go about identifying the proper person and reaching out to them in a respectful way that they're going to be open and receiving to me for someone they've never met or worked with before?
no, I think what they need to do is, so let's just say, for example, you go on LinkedIn and you click on, you know, my name,
Mhm.
okay, and you send me a message. You connect with me. I'm going to connect back, and because I want to help others, that is the primary reason. And then if they start talking to me about, you know, what their ambition is, what their goals are, and I'm going to know in the first 5 minutes if this person is somebody that has the capacity to do it. And most of the times they do, because they have the passion and because they've reached out. That's half the battle, is reaching out.
Mm.
And I may not be a specific person that they do, but I may say, you know what, why don't you try this? Or why don't you do that? Have you thought about that? Are they a college graduate? Have you used your career counseling office, even though you're graduated? Have
Mhm.
you used somebody in your alumni? Something. And there's career services like crazy across the nation.
Yeah.
And I think they just need to use their resources. Do they have a updated resume? I think that's key. Do they have their profile updated so that if somebody goes to look at it, they say, "Hey, wow, this is somebody I'd be interested to talk to." But it's just that initial. It's a simple message. Could I have an opportunity to speak with you?
Yeah. And there's a lot of things you can do with that, and that's a great point. And going back to the resumes and cover letters, right? Obviously, those are extremely important. And we talk about having that entrepreneurial mindset and going that extra step and reaching out to people being more than half the battle and connecting with them more than just hitting the connect button. If you want to have your resume taken a look at, you can most likely partner with an HR professional at any of the major companies or any company you really. Same idea. Reach out to them, say hello, and just say simply, "Hey, I'm really looking for some assistance." People in hospitality before COVID are some of the most giving, caring people I've ever met that really
Well,
will invest their time in you. People you've never met before, people I've never met, invested a lot of time in me prior to COVID. I'll bet you anything that you can find at least one HR manager out there that will take the time to look at your resume for you and kind of give a one over and help you develop that resume to the current standards. Does that seem fair to say, David?
without question, I would put my money on that bet any day of the week,
Absolutely.
without question.
So let's talk about yourself again. So you're currently working, right? But as you said towards the top of the show, people are still working on limited schedules, less than 5 days a week, and pay scales being structured down and whatnot. So people have to get a little unique and, in your words, pivot into finding new ways to find money. So at the what's the word? At the I'm having terrible time with words today. What is wrong with me?
All right.
At the motivation of your children, you start to pivot yourself as well and start one of your own endeavors because of COVID, and use the experience that you have to help people and also help your monetary situation. So kind of give us an idea of what went into starting your own consulting company while still working, I won't say full time, but still working in time.
Well, I would say over my career, I've at one point I would keep track of how many managers that I've mentored along the way, and hourly employees that potentially went into a leadership role or just dealt with a situation in their own career.
Mhm.
And in today's, if I was to tally it up, I'd be probably well over 1,000 people that I feel over my 35-year span that I have truly, truly spent quality time with. So I feel that it's either through interview coaching, how to answer a star interview question, and I've done an article on it that was recently picked up by Hospitality Net, and it's posted on my webpage on some simple steps that you would take to master the art of the interview. So I feel like I had a real knack for that, and I've been able to come up with a way that I think I want to say a foolproof system, because you're still got to be the one who's got to go in there and get the job,
Right.
but I can give you the tools to help get you there. So I've done that over the years many, many times. And I've also led in very diverse union labor markets. So I understand it, not from necessarily being a union attorney, but how to manage in a union environment.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with a conflict situation, whether it's a meltdown where you're having an employee, get into a conflict with another employee, whether it's a wildcat strike, whether it's dealing with somebody who didn't do a call around properly, and then it comes back and you have a back pay issue. These are things that happen, and I've had direct experience, hands on in the front lines, that I can relate to people that have.
And just sorry to interrupt you again. So just again, I'm trying to develop the show also as an educational thing for people that, again, either haven't worked in union environments, maybe you're new to the industry. When David refers to a call around, he's not talking about a call around calling other hotels to get their rates and occupancies. He's talking
Yeah,
about in a union environment, when a person in a department calls out, there is a specific order, typically based on seniority, that you have to call in replacements. And if you don't do that in that specific order and don't do that properly, you owe a lot of money to a lot of people. So that's what
right,
David's talking about when he's saying a call around.
right. Because in a union world, it's all based on seniority,
Yep.
and and if you don't follow the seniority list, and you call in somebody because you just feel that that was easiest for you as the manager, you're going to end up paying the people before them, and it could be 3 or 4 people, and it can't add up because it's
Yeah,
for a full shift.
absolutely.
It's not just for an hour. So I looked at those things that I really feel that I have a real con, strong ability to bring value to, whether it's individuals or organizations. So I reached out to my company and I says, I want to start my own consulting firm, to offset and balance. 2 reasons. Number one, I really want to help people. That is my primary focus, and this was my way that I really felt that I could do so. And then also, if there was a monetary income, but I'm not getting it rich over it, I need to have a full-time position. And I love working. I truly do. And I love working for a branded company that is, in my heart. But if my consulting firm was to lead into something well past my career in the hotel industry, I still want to stay connected with it. And I felt that this is the way that if there was ever an opportune time to do it, this was it. So I started what they call IU, Hospitality Consulting, where it's inspiring you is the theme behind it. And you can find it online at www.iuconsult.com. And, those are my primary key areas. Within that organization, I also became a member of the Cayuga Hospitality Consultants Network. So I act as a consultant listed on their site as well, that will bring value for interview coaching and leading in a diverse union environment, as well as doing transparent observations if there's any type of cost controls, whether it comes to labor and that sort of thing, that I can bring value. But this is something that I may never have started, or should I say, I probably wouldn't have started if it wasn't for COVID-19.
That was my next question was, did you have this plan prior to COVID?
Well, I've always said that I wanted to do this, but I wanted to do this in my post hotel career life.
Yeah.
But right now I'm balancing both, and it's going very well. And I've got hopefully another article coming out in January, but the article that's online right now is called "Mastering the Art of the Interview." And I'm going to have another article coming out soon, and I'm excited about that. And I'm also a council member for GLG, and this is all listed on my LinkedIn profile.
Mm.
And I try to really make the LinkedIn profile as informational as it possibly can be about me as a hotelier, as a consultant, as a coach, so people feel comfortable that they could talk to me. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to reach out to you is, I want to get my message out, and I want to be able to start somewhere. And, I figured a podcast, I've never done one before, so I'm excited to be here. And, hopefully this is going to lead to other things down the road.
Yeah, I mean, the COVID's obviously forced us to do different things, right? And I certainly never would have been starting this podcast if it wasn't for COVID. And I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know where the future is going to go, but it's my goal here is to be a source for the industry, right? A resource for the industry and for people out there. And you talk about finding resources on LinkedIn. So if I'm a job seeker and I'm really feeling lacking confidence in my search, whether it be because of my resume, but because of my experience, because I'm just applying for the wrong positions, do you, as in your consulting company, do you take on individual seekers, or are you working mostly with companies as a leader?
Yeah, whether you're an aspiring leader, an ownership group, a boutique organization, an independent operator, anybody who wants to speak with me, we'll take some time to, understand what your needs are, what your goals are, and see if it's a fit, and see if I can bring value to you. It could be a 30-minute conversation that somebody can be. I always say it'll be the best 30 minutes of your life if you just give me the opportunity.
Yeah, and again, this goes back to what I was saying before, which is the hospitality industry spawns so many great people to just bounce ideas off of, get support from. I mean, listen, David has his consulting company now because he's having that entrepreneurial mindset through COVID. As he said, he probably never would have done this if COVID wasn't there. But I'll bet you your bottom dollar that if you were someone who had reached out to David as he was having his full-time job, he still would have taken the time to reach back to you and work you through some things.
Yeah, and it's not one of those types. It's like, I'm a graduate of Johnson Wales University, and when I graduated in 1986 from culinary school, and I got my food service management degree in '88, it was a college. It wasn't even a university yet, so I hate myself, I guess, a little bit here. But I still am very active alumni. My college roommate is a professor in the university. I stay very connected with them. Very connected with the president of the university at the Providence campus, and I try to go there often. Recently, I've been on a panel with Johnson Wales, particularly around COVID. Recently, there was a panel out of a company based out of Singapore called SensorFlow that does automated HVAC thermostat control for guest rooms in the South Pacific and in Europe. And so I was a guest speaker on how the impact of COVID has impacted the industry. So you can find that also on my webpage. But my webpage is packed with information so far. And, one of the things that I'm trying to do is just, hopefully bring some education and bring value to others in their own endeavor.
Yeah, and that's all people can ask for. So, David, you've come up on time here. You've given us such great insight, especially from someone who is in a I shouldn't say unique position, but a position that not many envy to be in terms of closing a property permanently. And I really appreciate you being so open and honest with us about that scenario and about that story. So give us one final shout out for yourself. Where can people find you? if anybody wants to get some consulting or some career advice, where can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so go to www.iuconsult.com.
All right. Very simple. David, thank you very much for your time today. Really appreciate you being my guest. And obviously, we'll be staying in contact from here on out. So I'm always happy to meet another person in the industry and network with a great professional like yourself.
Sounds great. Have a happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you, David. Wow. Really powerful stuff from someone who has been in the industry for a long time, who has seen pretty much anything and everything you can see, has worked in some of the most impressive cities in the world and been successful. And you hear his story about how he's had to close his hotel, and the career question comes in that he has all this experience and now what? And he has all these responsibilities and now what? And it's great to hear someone who has been as established as David is. And I get it, it's his kids, but looking towards the younger generation for inspiration. And not many people can do that. Not many people do that, even if it is their family. And you can see he spawned his consulting company, and I would say it's in no small part to the work that his children have done to develop their own pivot points or develop their own companies and branch out and try something new. And again, we talked to a lot of people on the show about how COVID has, in a way, forced them into something new they never would have thought of, but now they're loving doing it. David's a perfect example of that. So if you're out there, please take David up on his offer, reach out to him. He can definitely be a big help to you, no matter what market you're in, no matter what stage of your career that you're in. David has the experience. Again, David Salcfas. I'm going to put it on the screen one more time. It's Salcfas for those of us who are listening on the audio version of this. With that said, I want to thank each and every one of you for, again, being my guest. We'll be back next week with another great episode. Thank you so much, and we will see you next time.